All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, awesome. So today we're going to tackle this lecture by Neville Goddard, Jeremiah's Discovery. It's from like 1969, so pretty far out there. But it gets into some really fascinating ideas about the power of imagination.
Absolutely. Really mind-bending stuff.
Totally. So have you ever come across that line from Jeremiah? Thy words were found and I ate them.
Oh, yeah. Definitely rings a bell.
So that's kind of the jumping off point for this whole lecture. Goddard uses it to explore how our imagination really shapes our reality.
Yeah. Yeah, and he really gives that whole eating the word of God thing a completely different spin.
Oh, for sure. Like not literally eating a Bible, right?
You're right, exactly. He's talking more about like internalizing the word, really experiencing that divine truth, instead of just reading it passively.
Yeah, totally. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually like savoring a delicious meal. You really got to, you got to experience it.
Exactly. It's about like really digesting it and making it a part of you.
Totally. But he doesn't stop there. Like he makes a pretty bold claim about what Jeremiah actually like discovered.
Right. He's saying Jeremiah's big revelation was that God is human imagination.
Whoa.
Yeah, pretty wild, right? And he ties this into the poet William Blake, particularly his poem The Lamb. Have you ever read that one?
I think so, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory.
Sure, yeah. It goes, I a child and thou a lamb, we are called by his name. Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah. But knowing Blake, I'm guessing there's more to it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole lot going on beneath the surface. You see, Blake was a mystic, and a lot of his work explored really deep spiritual themes. And he believed that human imagination was basically the same thing as the divine body of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so not just talking about fluffy sheep here.
No, not at all. And he even says that anyone who denies this is living in a delusion, basically.
So both Blake and Goddard are saying that this imaginative force we have inside us is like the same divine force that created everything.
That's the gist of it, yeah. It's a pretty radical concept, for sure.
Yeah, totally radical. So does Goddard give any examples of how this truth has been like misinterpreted or lost over time?
He does, actually. He points to how some of the early church fathers added words to the Bible, to back up their own traditions. Like, for example, he talks about the addition of water, and to John 3:5, the verse about being born again.
Oh, right.
He emphasizes that the spirit, like the wind, is what's actually important for spiritual rebirth, not the physical act of water baptism.
So he's saying the ritual became more important than the actual spiritual meaning.
Exactly. He's saying they got kind of caught up in the outward stuff and missed the deeper meaning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of like how we sometimes get caught up in appearances and miss like the real substance of things.
Exactly. He also talks about additions to John 6 that support Holy Communion. Goddard argues that true communion is about internalizing the word, not the ritual.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. So basically, he's trying to cut through the noise and get to the real heart of this truth about imagination.
That's it. And he even brings up warnings in Proverbs and Revelation about adding to or taking away from Scripture.
Okay, so back to this whole imagination as the ultimate creative force thing. Goddard uses a phrase, the world is God pushed out, and you are God pushed out. What exactly does he mean by that? It's pretty intense.
Right. Powerful imagery. Basically, he's saying that everything in the world, us included, is like a manifestation of God's imagination.
Yeah.
And since we're, supposedly made in God's image, our own imagination is like a reflection of that divine power.
Wow. So we're all like mini creators walking around with a little bit of that divine spark in us. It's a pretty incredible thought.
It really is. And Goddard believed that realizing this truth is like the key to unlocking true freedom and understanding our own divine nature.
Powerful stuff. But, I mean, this kind of awakening probably doesn't happen overnight, right? Like, it's got to be a process.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure.
So how does he describe that process of, like, waking up to the power of imagination? What does that look like?
He talks about it as a deep hunger, a yearning to really, truly hear the word of God. He even compares it to a prophecy in Amos about a famine, not for food or water, but for hearing the word.
So it's not something you can just, like, think your way into.
It's more like a revealed truth that comes from within, not logic or reason.
It's like a gut feeling and an intuition that there's something bigger at play.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. He also makes a distinction between true baptism, which is about a spiritual experience of connecting with the divine, and the physical act of water baptism.
So the real transformation happens internally, not just externally.
Exactly, like a shift in our consciousness.
Okay, so let's say we accept this idea that imagination is this incredibly powerful force. How do we actually use it? How do we control our reality with it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, for real. What does that look like in practice?
Well, Goddard brings up this principle of, as a man sows, so shall he reap. Essentially, what we consistently imagine, what we believe in, that's what ends up showing up in our lives.
So it's not just wishful thinking.
No, not at all. It's about consciously directing our imagination toward what we want to experience.
So like planting seeds with our thoughts and beliefs, and then those seeds grow into our reality. Does that mean we're responsible for everything that happens to us, even the stuff we can't control?
That's a big question. It gets into the whole free will thing. How much power do we actually have, right? Goddard definitely believed we have the power to both limit ourselves and break free from those limitations. He puts it this way. No one takes our power away. We choose how to use it.
That's a pretty powerful statement. It implies we have more agency than we might think. But he also mentions this idea of an immortal self that exists beyond the limitations of the physical world. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, he touches on that, the idea that after our physical body dies, we ascend to a realm of perfection where all limitations disappear.
So like going back to our true nature, our immortal self.
Right. It's a really interesting concept. He doesn't dive super deep into it in this particular lecture, but it raises some fascinating questions about consciousness and what happens after death.
Yeah, for sure. So even though our physical existence is temporary, there's a part of us that keeps going, free from the limitations of the material world.
That's what he suggests, yeah. And he ties this immortal self back to the source of our true power. He even compares it to the sun, saying that the awakened self, like the sun, transforms everything it touches.
Whoa. Okay, now earlier we talked about William Blake's poem, The Lamb, and how it connected to Jeremiah's discovery. Does Goddard revisit this poem later in the lecture?
He does. He circles back and reveals a deeper meaning. He explains that the lamb symbolizes universal humanity, what Blake called Albion, but fragmented into individual beings.
Albion, huh? I'm going to need a little help with that one. Who or what is Albion?
It's Blake's term for, the original unified human being, a kind of archetype that represents all of humanity. He believed we were all once part of this unified whole, but we've become separated and fragmented over time. So the lamb in the poem represents this fragmented state, each of us a little piece of the larger whole.
So it's about how we've lost touch with that divine unity, that sense of oneness with each other and with God.
Exactly. And Goddard hints at the idea of returning to unity with God the Father, what Blake referred to as the one man, as we awaken to our true nature.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to unpack from a poem about a lamb.
Blake was deep like that.
We need a whole separate deep dive just on Blake's work. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to Jeremiah's discovery and what it means for us. What are the big takeaways from this lecture so far?
Well, one of the biggest is that we have way more power over our reality than we think. Goddard is really challenging us to take ownership of our thoughts and beliefs, realizing they're the seeds that create our experiences. He's basically saying, hey, you're not just a passive observer in this cosmic play, you're a co-creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not just along for the ride.
Yeah.
He's urging us to step into that role of co-creator and actually shape our reality with our imagination. But this isn't just some fluffy positive thinking exercise. He's talking about a deep shift in how we understand ourselves and our relationship with the divine.
Absolutely. And he's not sugarcoating it. This awakening can be a journey with its ups and downs, but ultimately he believes it leads to a much deeper understanding of our true nature and our connection to something much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, it's a lot to ponder for sure. And it sounds like he's challenging us to not just understand this intellectually, but to actually put it into practice in our lives, to actually experiment with our imagination and see what we can create. But we've only scratched the surface of this lecture. There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, it really is a call to action, isn't it? Goddard wants us to move beyond just thinking about these concepts and start actually experimenting with them in our lives.
Totally. It's one thing to say, okay, my imagination is powerful, but it's another thing entirely to actually put that power into practice. So
Yeah.
how do we do that? Like, how do we actually use our imagination to shape our reality?
Well, Goddard offers some really practical techniques. He talks a lot about the importance of creating vivid mental images of what we want.
Okay, so visualization.
Yeah, but there's a key element. It's not enough to just picture it. You have to actually feel the emotions associated with that outcome as if it were already happening.
So it's not just a dry visualization exercise. It's about tapping into the feeling of already having achieved the goal. Almost like tricking your mind into believing it's already real.
Exactly. He calls this living in the end, meaning you shift your consciousness to the point where that desired outcome feels so real that it draws itself into your physical experience.
That sounds like it takes a lot of focus and discipline.
It does. But Goddard compares it to an athlete training for a competition. Just like an athlete needs to practice consistently to achieve their goals, we need to train our minds to align with our desires. It's a mental muscle, basically.
So we're building that mental muscle through practice. Are there any specific tools or techniques he suggests for doing this?
He's a big advocate for affirmations and visualizations, like repeating positive statements about yourself and your desired outcomes and creating those vivid mental pictures that evoke the feeling of already having what you want.
This reminds me a lot of modern self-help and manifestation techniques. It seems like Goddard was way ahead of his time in understanding the power of the mind.
He really was, and you can see how his teachings have influenced so many people who have gone on to achieve incredible things.
Now, I know Goddard also talks about the importance of forgiveness in shaping our reality. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, forgiveness plays a huge role in his teachings. He emphasizes that holding on to resentment and anger can actually block us from manifesting our desires.
So it's not about condoning someone else's actions. It's about freeing ourselves from that negative energy that's holding us back.
Exactly. He's not saying you have to excuse bad behavior. It's about letting go for your own sake.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he even suggests using imagination to revise past experiences that are causing you pain or holding you back.
Revise past experiences. What does that look like?
Basically, you replay the experience in your mind, but change the ending to something more positive and empowering. You can imagine yourself responding differently, or even rewrite the scene altogether to create a more desirable outcome.
So it's like taking control of the narrative in our own minds and choosing to focus on the positive.
Exactly. And he believed that by doing this, we could actually change the energetic imprint of the past and free ourselves from its limiting influence.
It makes you wonder, if we can rewrite our past, what are we capable of creating in the present and the future?
That's the heart of his message. He wants us to become conscious creators of our own realities, not passive recipients of circumstance.
He also talks about the importance of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
And how it can amplify our ability to manifest.
Oh, absolutely. Gratitude is fundamental in Goddard's teachings. He believed that feeling grateful for what you already have opens you up to receive even more blessings. He encourages us to cultivate gratitude for the simple things in life as well as the things we're working towards.
So it's about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we already have and appreciating the abundance that's all around us.
Precisely. And there are simple ways to practice this, like keeping a gratitude journal or just taking a few moments each day to reflect on the things you're grateful for. It sounds simple, but it can really shift your whole mindset.
These are all very practical and accessible tools, even for someone who's just starting to explore these ideas. It's not just airy-fairy philosophy. There are tangible steps we can take to apply these principles to our lives.
Yeah, I think that's what makes Goddard so appealing to a lot of people. He offers a bridge between the mystical and the practical.
Now, we can't really talk about Goddard without touching on some of the deeper theological concepts he explores, like the nature of God and this idea of the immortal self. Can you give us a little overview of his perspective on those ideas?
Sure. Goddard's theology is rooted in the idea that God is not separate from us, but rather that we are all expressions of the divine.
So we're all connected to that divine source.
Exactly. He believed that the true God resides within each of us, and that by awakening to this truth, we can tap into that infinite power and creativity that's already there.
So heaven isn't some far-off place, but a state of consciousness we can access right here and now.
That's the idea.
And what about this idea of an immortal self, the part of us that exists beyond the limitations of time and space?
Right. He describes this immortal self as our true essence, the part of us that's eternal and unchanging. And he believes that this part of us is always connected to God, and through this connection, we can experience true freedom and fulfillment.
So even though our physical bodies are temporary, there's a part of us that continues to exist. What does that mean for how we live our lives in the here and now?
That's a great question. Goddard believed that by connecting with our immortal selves, we could tap into a source of wisdom, guidance, and strength that can help us navigate the challenges of life.
It's like having an inner compass that always points us in the right direction.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that we're not alone in this journey. We have access to a source of infinite wisdom and support that's always available to us if we just tune in.
This is all pretty profound stuff, and I have to admit, it can be a bit overwhelming to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it can be a lot to take in. Goddard's teachings aren't for everyone. They definitely require a willingness to step outside of conventional thinking and embrace a more expansive view of reality.
But for those who are seeking a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the universe, Goddard's lectures offer a wealth of insights and inspiration.
Absolutely. His work has inspired countless people to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
We've covered so much ground in exploring Jeremiah's discovery, and it's clear that this lecture is just packed with profound ideas and practical tools for transforming our lives.
It really is. And the journey's not over yet. We still have more to unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground already. Imagination as this creative force, the importance of forgiveness and gratitude, even touched on Goddard's views on God and the immortal self. But there's this one thing, kind of big thing, we haven't really dug into yet. The whole feeling aspect. Like, how important is feeling in all this?
Oh, yeah, that's crucial. Feeling is, well, essential to pretty much everything Goddard teaches. It's not just about thinking about what you want.
Right.
You got to actually feel it, like it's already real.
Okay, so he talks about this feeling the reality of the wish fulfilled. Sounds kind of mystical, but what does that even mean in practice?
It means getting into that state of mind, that state of being where what you want, it just feels so real, so undeniable, that you don't even question if it'll happen.
So it's more than just positive thinking.
Way more. It's about embodying the feeling of already having it, like it's yours right now.
But our minds, they love to throw doubts our way.
Oh yeah, all the time. They try to convince us that what we want is impossible or too far out of reach.
So how do we get past those doubts? How do we really embrace that feeling that it's already done?
Goddard's big on using our imagination to create these full-on sensory experiences.
Okay, so not just visualizing.
Right. It's more than that. Imagine seeing it, hearing it, touching it, even tasting it, smelling it, bring all your senses into it.
So creating a movie in your mind.
Exactly. And not just watching it, but living it, being the main character, and practice it regularly until those feelings become so natural you don't even have to try. It's just, your default state.
Sounds powerful, but I bet it takes dedication and a willingness to suspend disbelief, right?
Oh, for sure. It takes effort. But the payoff, it can be amazing. Goddard believed that when we can consistently feel that reality, that wish fulfilled, we become like magnets drawing everything we need to us.
Okay, so aligning our energy with what we want.
Exactly. But there's another piece he emphasizes. It's the surrender part.
Surrender. Wait, so we're talking about taking control, using our imagination, and now we have to surrender.
It might seem kind of contradictory, but surrender is huge in Goddard's teachings.
Okay, so how does that fit in?
It's about letting go of the need to control every little detail. Because at the end of the day, we're not the only ones creating our reality.
Right, we're co-creating.
With something much bigger than ourselves. So it's about trusting that the universe, or God, whatever higher power resonates with you, has a plan.
So trusting that things might unfold differently than we expect.
Exactly. It's not about giving up on our dreams, but letting go of the attachment to how they'll happen. Trusting that something even better might be on its way.
So having faith, even when we can't see the whole picture.
Exactly. Diving into Goddard's work has been really eye-opening. He had such a deep understanding of the mind, of human potential.
Yeah, his teachings are so full of wisdom.
And they're timeless, they still resonate with people today.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jeremiah's discovery, what are some of the key things you hope listeners will take away?
I hope they realize that we're all capable of creating incredible lives. We have this power within us, and Goddard gives us a way to tap into that.
It's like a call to action, right? To
Right.
step into that role of conscious creator.
Absolutely, to shape our reality with intention and purpose.
This has been an incredible journey. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on Neville Goddard.
It's been my pleasure.
To all our listeners out there, Keep diving deep and never underestimate the power you have within you.
Feel the reality of the wish fulfilled and watch your dreams unfold.
Until next time, keep exploring those infinite possibilities.